Hello and welcome to another What's Your Baseline Shorts. Today we're going to be talking about capabilities, and I'm J.M. Burlinson. I'm one of your hosts for today, a process and architecture expert. Been doing this for a decade and a half, and I'm a big fan of helping to bring business ideas together, which is why capabilities is such an important topic to me. And my friend and co-host Roland, talk to us about yourself.
As always, brief and short, my name is Roland. I had the idea for that whole thing. And obviously, we're going to talk about capabilities today in our What's Your Base on
Absolutely.
Short. So, JM, what is a capability? Is it me being able to tie my shoelaces?
That's a great question. So I feel like capability is an abstraction of something that you're doing to achieve a business outcome or service that can be quantified or can be qualified in a way that others can access it. So capabilities that you're creating are things your company can do internally or externally that allow your company to do business. Now, it's not a process though. It is closely aligned to processes in some cases, but they are not exactly processes. So I think of them as an abstraction, a layer above that allows us to now interlock it with other parts of the business and of the whole company.
Yeah, I would
Now, Roland,
describe it.
what's your
Yeah,
definition?
I would describe it slightly differently, even though I use the same words that you have. A
Sure,
capability is something that an organization can do, period.
just period.
But the capability is comprised of multiple things. One is the process.
Yeah,
The other one is the organization who does
sure,
it, right? The roles. It's the skills that you need.
yeah,
It's the applications. It's
sure,
the data. It's the location where this happens, and so on
yeah.
and so forth. So the capability is a construct of all those different things that describe what an organization can do. It's
Which is
not,
actually something. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
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 not
it's it's
what, yeah,
not what one thing does at a time. Yeah,
yeah,
I
it's
understand.
that exactly right. It's not included, and we're gonna talk. Maybe we talk about this. It's not included in how well you do it,
No,
right?
you
That
you
would
can
be
put
something like
KPIs against that, right? Though.
that's true, but that would be if you really perform it. That would be something like a business service. So I typically, when
Right.
clients ask me and say, "Hey, what's the difference?" I typically say a little bit loosely. I say, "Well, your business service is your capability with an SLA attached to it." Right? I'm
That's
going to
fair.
do this project for you in this amount of time for this amount of cost and whatnot.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting thing because a lot of people like to think of processes as capabilities, like your process hierarchy and your capability
Mhm.
hierarchy. Well,
Mm-mm.
it's really just the same thing. But I think
Mm-mm.
you've outlined it. And I think we want to start first and foremost break this idea right open. Is that your process isn't your capability? Your process delivers a capability, but it's part of the puzzle.
It's
There's a
part, yeah, it's
but it's
part of
part
the
of the puzzle,
capability.
part of
It
the
it it
capability.
shows it shows the step that you will perform to do this thing that you're capable of doing.
But
It
just like you
does
might think
not.
a process has a spider web of other things, a capability, one of the things is a process.
The
So it,
capability describes the what. The
yes,
process and all those other things describe the how.
exactly.
Right? If you think about when you're in a system implementation and you would go and say, "Hey," and I did this in a previous life where I was
Hmm.
the program architect for a large global 3-year, 20 million build implementation where in a previous firm, we wanted to invent our internal audit offering, right? And
Yeah,
we were just looking at, okay, hey, this is what we need to be able to do, plan internal audits and schedule resources and do the program management and issue tracking and all those wonderful things in one tool. But we looked at it, and here in the US, the firm had about 3,500 internal auditors, people who
okay,
did that for a living.
yeah,
In the Netherlands, it was like 35, 50, right? So the requirements that the guys in the Netherlands had were much lower fidelity than what we had here in the United States.
hmm,
So capabilities can come in different flavors, right? Are called capability configurations. So think about gold, silver, bronze, right? In that case, where the Goldilocks solution that we built here for the United States was obviously much more expensive and way more fanciful versus the bronze version that we did for our Dutch friends, who just didn't have those requirements, right? So the
yeah,
capability was, yes, they all could deliver internal audit projects, right? They had
yeah,
the capability to schedule and plan and do and whatnot, right? But the way how you done it was through different configurations. And that was the obviously helpful when it came to planning the whole timeline, right? Because there might be dependencies between them. You need to build something for the gold version, and you just cannot assume that it exists for, in this case, a country where we implemented the bronze version, right?
Yeah.
Something to think about.
I love you using the word fanciful. In North America, it had to be more fanciful. But this is something where you're touching on, and this is what I really want to get the meat of this is that capability is kind of that interlock that you're seeing
Hmm.
in a lot of different contexts. And as you're building out capabilities, we're touching on different areas, and we're touching on those areas as this like sort of centralized interlock that will help us understand what the requirements are passed between different spaces. So connecting business to IT is a perfect example one. And Roland, I know you've worked a lot of with IT capabilities and how they
Hmm.
relate to business. Let's talk about why that's so important.
Oh, you open another can of worms. You like those What's your baseline shorts to open
Oh
those type
yeah.
of things here. All right.
we
So
we have we have we have a little time, but we do have time.
All right. So I think we need to introduce another concept here. One is
Please, yes.
obviously business capabilities.
Yes.
I, as a business, as an organization, want to be able to do X, Y, and Z,
Sure.
right? But then you break them down over multiple levels. I typically say stick to three, four, because obviously the deeper you get, the wider the pyramid will be, the more complex
Hmm.
it becomes, yada, yada, yada. At some point in time, you will hit applications. And
Yeah.
applications do have quote unquote capabilities too, right? And this is where the distinction now comes in: business capability versus technical capability.
Yeah.
My favorite application can take coffee orders, brew coffee, and serve coffee.
Hmm.
That's completely independent of the whole context of, oh, I want to be able to run a coffee shop,
Yeah.
right? There is the need for a machine or an application that can do those three things that I said. So separate, and that's the takeaway: separate between business capabilities, what the organization does, versus the technical capabilities that maybe an app or a machine has.
Yeah, and talk about that specifically. I feel like I see a lot of clients tell me that how they do business or how their business runs on applications
Hmm.
is driven by the application. And
Yeah.
that is a locked in mindset. You're stuck. You can't ever switch off that application because if that's how you do things, but it's not. You are leveraging an
Mm,
application capability, and that application capability could be performed by any application or any part of a number of applications. So when you're looking at evolving your IT landscape, if you start with the point of how we do things as applications, then you're only ever going to be able to make a solution choice of the applications. Where if you
that
talk
is
about it from capabilities, you can do anything.
that is semi-correct, I would say.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
basically you just pointed out how old I am, because this is not dyed, that's real gray. No,
I got grade too, baby. Don't worry.
but in all seriousness, what I've seen in the past is there are trends going through our industry.
Yeah.
When you think about the ERP stuff, where everybody says, no, don't do your own thing, standardize on what your application does. The
Hmm.
SAPs and the Oracles of the world, and you said, yeah, that saves us so much money because we don't have to think about upgrades, because we're following the standard process. And
Sure.
then the next wave was, oh yeah, automation. Oh no, you have your custom thing, Mr. Client. And we're happy to build this. So where vendors sold organizations the box of Legos to build their own stuff. Or you had, at a different time, you had that best of breed approach. Oh yeah, these are ranked by the analysts as number one in this area, and those are the ones that are number one in that area. You should bring them together. So I think it's more a question of the maturity in the organization to define, what do we actually want. And
Yeah.
for this, capabilities are a good thing. You take the step away, you say, yep, I want to open a coffee shop, right?
Yeah.
And for this, I need those three capabilities, right? Order, brew, serve. But I'm not tied to a certain application. I'm not
Right.
tied to a certain business model, if you will, right? I can take a step back and rationalize for myself what I want to do. And this is where capabilities are a good construct
Yeah, you
for.
use the word rationalize, and I think that when we look at application and in a capability and IT perspective, that's where I see a lot of people successfully using that as a marker for rationalization. If I
Hmm.
have 20, 30 applications with the same capability as part of their listed functionality sets,
Hmm.
then I can start looking at maybe this could have been done by one application. And sure, I'm going to have
Yeah,
to make some contractual concessions, and I'm going to have to, canceling things or not renewing or harmonizing. Maybe I have to adapt functionality and customize to actually
yeah.
meet my
There's some
company's
migration
needs.
costs that you
But
have.
but
Yep.
but you are focusing on capability as that common identifier to show duplication.
But you have the same with your processes. Stick with
And
another
that
example, right?
exactly.
Why do I have location one doing the same thing differently than location two?
Yeah,
That's a valid question. I think this is one of the takeaways of this episode of What's Your Baseline Choice
sure.
is where do capabilities fit into the bigger picture?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
obviously they do all the things that we just discussed, right? But in my mind, capabilities should be the main driver for developing your architectures. So when you
sure.
think about it, the way how I typically visualize it is, well, you have your strategy somehow modeled out, your vision, your mission, your objectives, your strategies, all that type of stuff, and the
Yeah.
KPIs that you measure your success with, right? But then the question comes up with, well, how do we bring this into fruition? Well, the answer is by defining capabilities. I want to be able to run a coffee shop, right? It doesn't say how I'm doing this, right?
No.
So that's the middle column here. And then obviously the uh, ultimate question comes, well, how do we bring this to life, which is the third column on that slide that I typically use, is, well, you're going to do this by implementing projects. So your capabilities drive the shape of your projects and your investments. And one key question that I always like to ask when somebody comes to me and says, oh, I have that wonderful idea, I want to have this, and it just costs so and so much is threefold. What capability do you create?
Hmm.
What capability do you change?
Yeah.
What capability do you retire? And if the answer is uh, none, well, then my answer is you don't get any money. Go home, right? Figure out where it fits. So, and then you go, the capabilities drive your project setup, your programs, your projects, and whatnot down to the work package, if you will, where you then actually create something, right? And that
Yeah.
something can be measured. And this is where it closes the loop because those are the KPIs that you will measure that then show did I accomplish my strategic objectives that I've set out in my strategy. So strategy, capability, projects, and programs.
Yeah, so bringing this all back together for this episode of What's Your Baseline Shorts, I think we're really hopefully giving you a sense of what the importance of capability is. Some people sometimes say, "I don't want to get to that level of capability. It seems like it's too much of a level of abstraction, extra work." Mm-mm. This is the interlock that will keep your work reasonable. This will give you a vision of the scope as realized by its different components, and it's important to do. So, number one is capabilities are important
Mhm.
and that they are what your company does and they contain a lot of the components of process and architecture and organization and data, all those sorts of things. That is capability. It's not just your process, it's not just your application services.
And I think if you to close that out is
Yeah,
obviously if you want to have more about this topic, I highly recommend it. It's about 50 minutes or so. Listen to our episode 2 where we were talking about why EA and BPM.
yeah.
And full spoiler alert, right? From our perspective, it's the same thing. It's just a different view on things because an organization has one architecture. It's
Yeah.
not different architectures. So capabilities help you setting the structure and staying sane in that setup. So listen to episode 2, YEA and BPM. And with
Sure.
that, I
Well,
think we'll let you go, right?
yes.
And my name is Roland Volt,
I'm J.M. Rollinson, and we will
and
see
we're going to see
you
you in
in
the
the
next
next
one.
one.